A new type of weapon has appeared in the war in Ukraine, which, according to available information, represents a fundamental technological breakthrough. It's not about drones, missiles, or precision artillery. According to information from the front, it's a ground robotic system that can defend a specific point for a long time without the physical presence of soldiers. It's not about a short deployment for a few hours or a one-time action, but about holding a position for weeks, even in an environment of active combat. The very ability to replace the continuous presence of infantry with technology is the reason why this is being discussed as a possible breakthrough in modern warfare. We will now gradually break down exactly what this system can do, how it works in practice, and what it means for the future of warfare in Ukraine and elsewhere in the world. The system we're talking about, a ground combat robot controlled remotely, changes one of the basic premises of ground warfare, that holding a position requires a disadvantage, the continuous presence of soldiers. According to information from the battlefield, this is technology that can take over this role without a person being physically exposed to direct danger. Military sources state that this method of defense can significantly reduce the need to keep people at the most exposed positions on the front line. The system is operated remotely, and decisions about its use are made by people outside of immediate danger. The technology does not act independently. Instead, it serves as a tool that changes the distribution of risk between humans and machines. At this point, we come to the first specific case from the front that illustrates this change in practice. According to published information, a system appeared at one of the positions that was able to hold the line for about 45 days without any breach of defense or losses among the defenders. This is a specific case where this system was deployed at a fixed position. It was a place where the enemy repeatedly tried to pass through, or where pressure was expected. The system's task was not to attack deep into the territory, but to hold the point and prevent penetration. At the same time, available descriptions indicate that it was not a continuous, autonomous operation. The system was deployed to the area repeatedly, with operators withdrawing it as needed, servicing it, and returning it to position. Even so, the result remained the same. The line was not breached and the defenders suffered no losses. The case of holding the position for 45 days is often cited as one of the first real examples of ground robotic systems moving from the experimental phase to practical combat use. While until recently they were discussed mainly in theoretical terms, this example shows that they can play a concrete and measurable role directly on the front line. Such a system works differently than many would imagine when they hear the term combat robot. It's not an autonomous machine that decides on its own whom and when to strike. According to available information, it is a remotely controlled platform operated by operators outside the immediate reach of combat, who have access to real-time footage from cameras and sensors. The key element is the connection between the operator and the system itself. According to published information, multiple communication channels are used to minimize the risk of signal loss. It is the stable connection that determines whether the system can be effectively deployed for a longer period, and in an environment where both sides are trying to jam or disrupt communication. From a practical point of view, such a system also has its limits. It requires energy, regular maintenance, and resupplying of ammunition. It is not capable of operating completely continuously without operator intervention. That's also the reason why it was repeatedly withdrawn from positions and then redeployed. Even so, it was able to fulfill a task that would otherwise have to be carried out by soldiers directly on site. Military analysts point out that this very model could be the direction in which ground warfare will develop. Not complete automation, but shifting the greatest risk from the trenches to technology. According to information that was later released, this system was deployed by the Ukrainian side. Specifically, it was a unit operating on an active section of the front, where pressure and attempts at breakthroughs had been expected for a long time. The deployment was not presented as a test in the rear, but as actual combat use in real conditions. According to statements by Ukrainian journalists and military observers, This is not an isolated experiment, but the first publicly documented case of long-term combat deployment of a ground robotic system in this role. At the same time, they emphasize that the available information is deliberately limited and details about the exact location or technical specifications have not been disclosed. According to Ukrainian military commentators, the fact that Ukraine has long had a problem with a shortage of infantry also plays a role in this approach. Deploying equipment that can at least partially replace people in defense thus becomes, from their perspective, not only a technological ambition, but also a necessity. The combat ground robots being discussed do not represent a single specific machine. Instead, it's a whole category of systems that armies worldwide have been developing for years. However, recently, especially in the context of the war in Ukraine, these technologies have started moving from test fields directly to the front lines. Generally, these are unmanned ground vehicles that move on tracks or wheels and are equipped with a weapon module. What's important is that the platform itself is modular, meaning the weapon, sensors, or communication elements can be changed depending on the mission. The manufacturers of these systems also emphasize that these are not fully autonomous weapons. Even though some elements can be automated, such as weapon stabilization or movement tracking, the decision to fire is always made by a human. That is an important difference compared to the idea of autonomous killing machines, which often appear in popular culture. At the same time, it's true that this is a technology in the early stages of deployment. Every combat use is also a test that reveals the system's weaknesses, from technical malfunctions to vulnerability to jamming or accurate fire. That's why armies are still approaching these solutions cautiously and deploying them more on selected sections rather than widely. Russian armed forces have also been working with ground robotic systems for several years now. According to open sources and Russian statements, Moscow invested in the development of several unmanned ground platforms even before the war, which were supposed to complement conventional units in the future. Some of these systems have also appeared during the conflict in Ukraine. However, available information suggests that the Russian deployment of ground robots has so far taken on a different character. Most of the documented cases involve tasks such as logistical support, transporting ammunition, evacuating the wounded, reconnaissance, or demining. There have also been reports of Russian robotic systems equipped with weapons, but their use appears to be limited, more episodic or experimental. According to military analysts and open-source observers, there is currently no publicly confirmed information that the Russian side has been using a combat ground robot for the continuous holding of a specific position over a long period, in a manner comparable to the case described on the other side of the front. However, this does not mean that they have not been pursuing or testing similar solutions. Russian military blogs and officials repeatedly talk about the need to automate the battlefield and reduce casualties among soldiers. However, according to available information, practical deployment faces technical limitations, reliability and communication issues, especially in environments with intense jamming and precise fire. That's why Russian robotic systems so far appear more in a supporting role rather than as a full replacement for infantry at exposed positions. In this context, analysts point out that the difference between individual armies may not lie only in the technology itself, but also in the way it is integrated into combat doctrine. Whether ground robots become a common part of the front will depend not only on their technical parameters, but also on how quickly their use can adapt to the real conditions of the battlefield. The question that naturally arises in such cases is whether these systems could replace people on the front lines in the future. Most military analysts agree that a complete replacement of infantry with technology is unlikely in the foreseeable future. The battlefield remains an environment of chaos, unpredictable situations, and quick decisions that still require the human factor. However, similar technologies can also fundamentally shift risk distribution. Places that are among the most dangerous today, exposed trenches, intersections, or access routes, could increasingly be guarded by machines, not people in the future. This could reduce losses and change the way armies plan both defense and offense. The case of deploying a ground combat robot on the Ukrainian front is therefore seen by many not as a one-time curiosity, but as a sign of a broader trend. A trend in which ground warfare is gradually shifting from the mass presence of infantry to greater use of technology, remote control, and automation. Whether this model will spread to other sections of the front and to other conflicts will only be shown by time. But it is already clear that the battlefield is changing and that technology will play an increasingly important role in who can hold territory and how.
If you liked the video, I would appreciate a like and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the others I'm currently working on. You can support my work through a thank you, and if you want to help the video reach more people, click on praise. I appreciate it.